What's good, YouTube, man? It's Philan Speaks back, man, for his latest video. Now, I know I haven't spoken much on the sport of boxing, really, in a few years, honestly. And I don't know how the algorithm is going to treat this particular video because the way it seems, it's like it pushes videos that you only speak on one particular topic. So, in other words, if I come out here and I make a video about something that's to do with women's basketball, WNBA, Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, or whatever, the algorithm will engage it and kind of push it out there because I'm kind of known for talking about that for the most part. Or similarly, if I do this for Jalen Hurts or something like that with the Eagles, maybe it'll get a little push. But if I go speak on something different, in this case, I'm going to talk about boxing. More than likely, it won't get pushed, but whatever. I just make videos, speak about things that I feel are something that I want to talk about, give my input on. And whatever happens, happens. I can't go out here and make 10 different channels, each about a different subject. I don't have the energy of the time nor desire to do though. So my channel is generally sports in general. And boxing is a sport, so here goes. All right, first of all, shout out to Too Raw for TV, whose video I saw and got the idea or the desire to speak on it about. And it's because of it's talking about two fighters, who are very near and dear to me, as a person. One being Marvelous Marvin Hagler, who I grew up watching. When I went and trained, in amateurs and so on, he's one of the guys, man, that I looked up to. Because when I was out there, I was in the 140 some odd pounds myself. So, obviously you're going to look at guys like Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, Duran, all those guys around that time. Also, some of my other favorites, guys like James Toney, who was a little bigger, but James Toney. One of my favorites definitely was the Hawk Aaron Pryor, Alexis Arguello, so on. All right, but Marvelous Marvin Hagler, the question was, or the issue was, who would win between Marvelous Marvin Hagler and Bernard the Executioner Hopkins? All right, and for the most part, you can go check out his video. Definitely shout out to him. I think he was leaning towards Marvelous Marvin Hagler, which I think a lot of people would. If you look in his comment section, pretty much I didn't see anyone pretty much picking Bernard Hopkins, and I wanted to weigh in on it myself. All right, first of all, man, both of these fighters named by Ring Magazine to be amongst the greatest middleweights of all time. All right, when Bernard was in his prime, before moving up, to light heavyweight and cruiserweight and different, weights that he ventured into, he had already been established himself as like the 17th best, and this was even before, the Felix Trinidad fight and the Oscar De La Hoya fight. He was way recognized, man, as a fighter, as a real one. All right, and he's a guy that ranks as my favorite fighter of all time. I straight up tell you that. Part of it is a little bit of a bias. Bernard Hopkins is a man I've met a number of times in my life, personally. We used to attend the same masjid. It's in 15th Street, South Jersey. I've had the opportunity to speak with him personally, seeing him at barbershops. We used to go to a barbershop that's on Spring Garden Street. I ain't got to mention every damn place where we were at, But I'm Tom's, man, he's sitting there in the barbershop chair. I'm in the other chair, and everybody's just talking, One time at something called the Islamic Festival that happens every year in Philadelphia, at a place called Penn's Landing. I had the opportunity, man, to really sit and talk to Bernard Hopkins for, a good 20 to 30 minutes. This was before his upcoming fight with Felix Trinidad at the time. I was obviously younger man at the time. So was he. And we discussed a number of things, man. Not only that fight, but also Felix Trinidad. At the time, I was still interested in boxing. I was kind of towards the end of my desire to really take it serious. But, I was asking him a lot of questions about the fight game, where, where I should train with and so on. He hooked me up with two different places. One person he hooked me up with was the great Matthew Saad Muhammad, who I trained with uptown in Philly, at a place called Waterview Playground, right? They had a gym out there. And also 33rd and Huntington was another trainer he hooked me up with, okay? So I've talked to Bernard Hopkins, so I'm not going to lie. There's a little bit of bias with me, but I'm going to try to be as fair as I can when I talk about this, okay? I don't think it would be a lopsided thing where Marvin Hagler just destroys Bernard Hopkins. I don't see that at all. I understand when people would say Hagler will win, but what I want to shy away from and get away from is a lot of the romanticizing about the golden age of boxing. And this is something that we kind of fall into. The 80s boxing, especially for middleweights, and you can even add heavyweights because, you have Mike Tyson then and Holyfield and those guys, right? Bone Crusher Smith, Larry Holmes, Spinks, that era. We tend to exalt that era, similar to how we do 90s basketball because Michael Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon were there. But we do that for 80s boxing, especially in the middleweight era, because you had the four kings, Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler, and Hearns, right? So Hagler comes from that era. And what I'm going to do from the outset, I'm going to give him points for that era. There's no doubt about it. If we were to have a checklist off of different points that we're going to give each fighter right straight away, the era that Hagler fought in, I'm going to give him points for it because not only were those fighters magnificent, but those fighters also didn't duck smoke with each other. It was Hagler fought Sugar Ray eventually. I mean, they were the ones that was the fight that kind of made Sugar Ray look a little scared or whatever because he fought Hearns, which I mean that's no soft thing at all. You look at Hearns' size and reach over him. He fought Hearns. He fought Duran. Okay, couldn't avoid Duran. Twice, fought Hearns twice. Hagler once. Hagler was the boogeyman of the division. He was a guy you just don't want to fight because he's just not going to quit. He's going to keep coming. He's pressuring you. He's a knockout artist. He has the highest knockout rate in the division's history of about 79 or 78%. He's just not an outing that you want. So I'm gonna from the rip give that to Hagler. So before you come in here arguing, he already got that. That's a given. All right. They both fought 67 fights, right? Which is amazing. Both the same amount of fights, especially when you consider how long Bernard Hopkins fought. He fought into damn near his 50s, which is crazy. That can be a benefit. It can also harm because, with that came some losses that I think he could have avoided on his record wise. All right, but I'm a little different from a lot of these dudes talking fights. We're going to get into talking about it because I'll probably talk about the fights a little bit more, especially with some big fights coming up, like that of, Terrence Crawford with Canelo coming up. I'll probably talk about that a little bit more, depending on how this goes. All right. So they both fought 67 fights, right? Hagler has 62 wins, 52 KOs, to only 3 losses. All right, which pretty much came on early in his career, similar to Bernard's as well. But with the last loss being to Sugar Ray Leonard, which was a very controversial fight. I'm still not sure if Leonard really won, but it's just one of those fights, man. That it happens in boxing. Of the noteworthy things of his fights, like I said, is the 78% KO percentage. He was 6 years as the champ, which is the sixth longest reign in history. Um, and I believe within that time he may have had, I think it was 12 successful title defenses. Don't quote me on that. I mean, that one I might have to look up, but I know it's something like that. What I also add with fighters, which is something a little different from others, is the amateur ranks. I believe that matters. In Marvelous Marvin Hagler was 55-1 in the amateurs as well, which is outstanding. The way he got into rumbling fighting was just out and about in the street fight. He fought against a an actual trained fighter at the time, lost the fight. And dude took his damn jacket off, beat him up, beat Hagler up so bad he took his jacket off him. You know what I mean? Like, nigga, give me your jacket type of joint. That's bad, you know. So right then he determined that he was going to learn how to box. He went and did that. He did the thing, man. Fought in the Olympics, the whole nine. So shout out to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. We'll talk about his style a little bit later. Now, when we look at Bernard Hopkins, I think it's important, man, to see the way he came up was unique in fighting, right? He was a street dude from not too far from the area I live in right now. He wasn't from North Philly. He's from Uptown, I believe. Uptown, which is the Germantown area, West Oak Lane, Mount area. But he was running the streets at the time. And we're talking about the 80s where, you know, you had the drug trade all over the place. You had gun work going on. There was the Jamaican Shower Posse. There's the Junior Black Mafia going on. All of that. He kind of was up in that, he came about in that era. So that led them going to prison at the age of about like 17. So, Bernard Hopkins is in prison. Prior to this, he's not really known as a fighter. He is known as a knockout artist on the street, though. Like, you know what I mean? He's one of them dudes, he one of them young boys that with hands that you wasn't trying to rumble. He goes to prison at the age of 17, spends 5 years in prison. All right, so he doesn't have the illustrious amateur career on paper that people have, but what he does have is something that I personally respect even more than an amateur career. Because during this time in Pennsylvania, they had a boxing division that was headed up by the prisons. Right? Because back in those days, man, prisons were places of rehabilitation. They weren't just places of just punishment. Like, they really did try to rehabilitate you. You could get your GED. Sometimes you could get degrees in prison. They made sure you had facilities where you could work out, stuff like that. Whereas now, they're taking a lot of those things out of prison, especially with assholes like the guy we got in the White House, who just wants to make people slaves and stuff like that. So, Bernard Hopkins fought in prison, okay? And they were in all the different prisons. They would have fighters, and you could train and everything. And these were some of the most vicious dudes you could rumble. Now, it's hard for me to kind of explain to y'all, sometimes the audience, why this impresses me. And the people he fought in the prison ranks, man, it might not be noteworthy to you nationally, but locally, these are guys we know. Artie Malaud, like, dude was an animal in the streets. People know about. He fought him in prison. Larry Stevenson is another dude. Like, these dudes were like some animals in prison, man. And Bernard Hopkins held the prison record, I believe. He was the champion of all in the whole prison division. We're talking about they had fighters from Camp Hill, fighters, Holmesburg, fighters all over, right? And he held that thing for about like 2-3 years, I believe. Before he came out and fought, went pro. All right, so this is where he was getting it, and you fought a couple times a week. that's what I'm saying. The prison thing was a little different. You might fight a couple times a week. You fighting like a couple times a month. It ain't that joint was crazy. But obviously his pro career comes later. He's 67 wins, 55. He has 55 wins, 32 by knockout. All right, so obviously the knockout advantage goes to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He has the highest of anybody. 8 losses, 2 draws. Okay, but see me, I'm not like a lot of people. I'm not gonna just look at a record and just think because of your record you're gonna beat somebody. That don't really mean nothing to me. Matter of fact, in the GOAT conversation, the record don't even factor in like that to me. Like I actually give points for dudes that lose fights, come back, win, and stuff like that because I'm looking at like the story behind that. I'm looking at the person going through adversity and meeting this match and overcoming it, and those things matter to me. All right, so now as far as these two fighting each other, uh, we're looking at Bernard Hopkins, who stands at 6'1" inches and is 71 with a 71-inch arm reach. All right, which is what you're supposed to be. You're about 6 feet. Your arm reach should be, but actually his arm reach is a little shorter, so that's a little concerning, right? Little concerning, but not really. It's about his arm reach is about an inch shorter than his height. Okay. Now, whereas Hagler, he's the classic freak athlete as far as these things go. All right, because he's at 5'11". He's standing at 5'11" with a 74-inch arm reach. So while he's 2 inches shorter than B Hop, 2 or 3 inches shorter, about 2 inches shorter than B Hop, he has longer arms, a 74-inch arm reach. And now, just so you understand the significance of this, because I hear some people, man, when Blue Blood Sports, for example, shout out to him who talks boxing. And he one of the reasons I only talk boxing because I think a lot of them guys handle it pretty well. He always mentions like a person's career record, and he always mentions their arm reach, and it's like he has this stuff memorized like a scholar. And I heard some people say, "But I don't care about a guy's arm reach." Well, if you're really a boxing fan, you realize those things do matter because to a boxer who pays attention to those small details, those things do matter. And when you watch smart fighters fight, like the Andre Wards, guys like that who don't get enough credit, because Floyd Mayweather gets all the damn credit in the world for everything. The Roy Jones Juniors and guys like that, you'll notice when they know they have an arm reach over somebody, they'll use it. They use jabs. They'll stick their arm out there to keep distance. They do different things like that, so those things do matter. So why is he a freak athlete? Well, because basically, when you talk about height and arm reach, right? There's in human anatomy, there's a 1-to-1 ratio, right? Which means that whatever a person's height is, the arm reach is supposed to, on the average, be the same as the person's height. All right, there's a 1-to-1 ratio. All right, so when a guy so that means if you are standing at say 5'10", okay, you're at 5'10", which is average height, your arm reach should be 70 inches, all right, which is about 5'10", right? It should be 70 inches. This is what they say. So we talk about Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He's 5'11". His arm reach should be about 71, but it's 74 inches. So you're talking 3 inches longer than the 1-to-1 ratio. That's why those guys are considered like freaks who good for boxing, Now, why is this significant? Because in a fight where Bernard Hopkins, with the style that he has, when you look at the style that Marvin Hagler has, Marvin Hagler, his main traits in this fight, besides his obvious power, would also be his pressure that he applies and the motor that he has. Those are the two things you're going to look at. Most people that see him winning, they would cite those things: his motor and his pressure. Okay, Now, where for Bernard Hopkins, who I would say is more of a counterpuncher, where it would be difficult for him is with Hagler having that long arm reach, right? Because the counterpuncher is kind of going to want a little bit more distance, and those types of things. So it is significant. Okay, so what I think would happen here, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it, is I think Bernard Hopkins will want to have as least distance as possible. He wants to be close to him. Why? He doesn't have the arm reach advantage. And also, you don't want a situation where Hagler can generate a lot of power, right? He's a southpaw, which don't really mean much to Hopkins because Hopkins has an excellent advantage. He has an excellent record against southpaws, right? I know he lost to Calzaghe, but he was old as hell at that joint. But he has an excellent record against southpaws. So what he would want to do is shorten the distance and kind of muck it up a little bit, even though that sounds insane because of the power that Hagler has. So, I don't know, man. When I think about it, I'm trying to think of a fighter that I would say Bernard Ford that's similar to Bernard. Would it be Iran Barkley maybe, who is the uncle of Saquon Barkley, the running back, right? Maybe. Uh, hmm. Now the advantages for Hopkins to me, I think, is in technical skill, right? For some reason, I heard someone mention that Hagler would have the technical advantage. That's absolutely false. Marvin Hagler is more of like the brawler type that's trying to get you up out of there. Whereas with though he does have some unorthodox punches with him, he has a flying left hook that I think could cause problems. But Bernard Hopkins is very, very one of the most cerebral fighters you find. Very smart fighter, man. And you that was no more on display than people would bring up fights like against De La Hoya, they'll bring up fights like against the Trinidad fight, right? But for me, actually was in a fight that he lost to Roy Jones Jr. in 1993. Okay. Listen, this was a fight that Bernard Hopkins lost to Roy Jones Jr., but it was a very close fight. And it was a fight against a fighter. It was a Roy Jones Jr. that, honestly, I don't know that anybody beats. Roy Jones, I don't know that anybody beats 93 Roy Jones Jr. 93 Roy Jones Jr. is probably, man, one of the three most physically gifted fighters that I've ever seen. I mean, just you talking about just pure athletic talent, right? When we talk that level, we talking Muhammad Ali, we talking like 86, 87 Mike Tyson, we talking Roy Jones Jr., man. Floyd Mayweather, you can add in there if you want, right? But we talking about just reflexes, see it before it's coming, get out the way type of stuff. Counter with speed that's so damn fast you just don't even realize you done got hit until this dude doesn't hit you with the second punch. I don't know. I've seen a better, more sharper fighter than Roy Jones Jr. at the time. So Bernard Hopkins loses that fight, but it's not like a dominant performance. I disagree with the brother, who I heard earlier. He said that Roy Jones won that fight easily. No, if you look at that fight, man, you go back to it. I remember in the first three rounds, Roy kind of won, but these were like fill out rounds. Bernard Hopkins didn't. I think he had a little bit too much respect for Roy Jones in that fight. Both of them actually did respect each other a lot. When we went into round 5, Bernard Hopkins really was only connecting on 14% of his punches from CompuBox, which is horrible. But Roy Jones was only connecting on about 22%, all right, which is extremely low and hard for him, which shows these were two great fighters who were just really filling each other out. Now, midway through the fight, when Roy Jones started to kind of like establish himself, well, I'm going to put it this way. I'll say after the first 3, I'll go to round 4, and then 5, 6. The main adjustment Roy Jones made to help his CompuBox numbers go up was he started to implement body shots. all right? Because he was very inaccurate going for Bernard Hopkins' head. Bernard Hopkins is so technically sound, he rarely leaves his head open. He doesn't drop his hands a lot. So he was blocking a lot of that stuff. And he's also good at slipping and dipping punches as well. So what Roy Jones did and Bernard Hopkins did way too late, he started to go to the body. That's what Roy Jones did. All right. Once he went to the body, this started to help his combi box numbers. Bernard Hopkins later in the fight, though, and this is where I'm pointing out his intelligence, was he started to adjust. And what he did was he started to force Roy Jones to the ropes, which gave him his advantage. Now, Roy is the same type of freak of nature that whatchamacallit Marvin Hagler is. Roy Jones stands at 5'10" with a 74-inch arm reach. All right, which is crazy. He's at 5'10" with 74-inch arm reach, and that speed and everything that he has. All right, so what Bernard realized with those guys is you want to close the distance, and in my opinion, Bernard actually won rounds 5 through 7 in that fight. You know, and so my thing is he wasn't dominated, and that was probably the best fighter he fought, especially in those early years. He fought not a lot of other noteworthy guys, but just seeing these two fight, I think what would happen is there would not be a knockout. All right, just in closing, I do not believe there would be a knockout. Bernard Hopkins is not a guy, especially if you're talking in his prime, that you just knocking out. Now he has been dropped before, but he always gets up and fights well. Marvin Hagler doesn't really get dropped much at all. Had one of the craziest chins that you remember in boxing. But in my opinion, I think Bernard Hopkins would be one of, if not the most cerebral fighters he fought. Now, I know people bring up Sugar Ray Leonard and so on. I think Sugar Ray Leonard was more of the athletic, talented guy. Bernard Hopkins relied a lot on smarts, intelligence, technicality, and it would be a hell of a fight that I think would come down to who has the most heart, who has the best motor, and for that, I don't know. I don't know. I know I'm a little biased. I want to go Bernard. I might still go Bernard, but for the sake of sticking to really what I kind of broke down on my own, I call a draw. I call a draw, or maybe Hagler by split decision. All right, so let me know what y'all think, man. Peace out.